Thank you.
Ames, you're earlier than I expected, which is great.
Okay, good. Yeah, hi, Joe.
And these are some of my friends.
Okay.
Ames is a friend. Let's see if Rick remembers, he came to the very first 10X, if I'm not mistaken. And he also spoke at in New Jersey, the 10X there, which was then for a short while branded MDTX. That was an experiment I didn't enjoy, but he did a fine job. And he is the founder and principal of a company called Pacific Bridge. And if you're doing business in Asia, you could do a lot worse than hang out with him for everything that he knows about distribution and business development and regulatory stuff. So it's been a while since we talked about the Far East, and I thought we were overdue. Say hi, team, before I throw you back into the peanut gallery. And do any of you, and I don't think at a glance, any of you on screen right now, do business in Asia? Maybe you, Luke, do you do any business in Asia? No. Oh, you do, Donovan? Tell us.
So we work with med device companies, technology companies mostly. And it doesn't have to be that they're based in Asia, that they're just doing business in Asia. And industrial companies around supply chain, automation, IoT, and some of the stuff that we spoke about before, the digital experience.
Mm-hmm.
Which company are you working at?
So my company's Innovate Digital.
Okay.
So we're a boutique Accenture, KPMG, BCG, McKinsey type.
Okay.
Just to narrow us down.
All right.
Throw us in a bucket.
Okay.
Eddie, you're too early stage, but tell Ames what you do.
Sure. We are developing devices for the urological sector. This is our first device. It's a device for chronic male retention. It has a valve in it. And yeah, we're still pre-revenue. We're getting our CE mark later this month is when we're filing that. So we would be looking eventually to be getting it into Asia. And in fact, actually just last week, we filed our patent in a national phase in Japan. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about, IP in China.
Is that that not too much, but is that device for like BPH or?
So it can be used for as a bridge to surgery. Question whether it might be a permanent alternative to surgery, but that is certainly one of the indications. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
For the kind folks at home who might not know the acronym, Eddie, BPH.
Benign prostate hyperplasia. So basically, enlarged prostate is for men one of the three ways that you can end up with urinary retention. Men have two sphincters and the prostate in between. Any one of those goes wrong and you can't pee.
I know this is a medical device show, but we could have gone without the word sphincter this morning.
Yeah, I can relate to that product because I'm having those issues as a elder
statesman.
Elder statesman. So yeah, I understand. So
So would you tell Ames what you're making?
Sure. Hi, Ames. Hi, team. I have a company called Cartech LLC. It's a medical device company, and we have built, patented, and now preparing for a 510K Class 2 for a safer, quicker, easier, greener solution to medications packaged in glass ampules. So we came up with an all-in-one package, one needle filter device to solve that problem.
okay, so is that for like for the valve for like an injectable drug? Are you talking about?
For ampule-based medication.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
I can show you real quick. Here's an ampule.
Yeah.
Here's a broken ampule.
Yeah.
And here's, we call the frog. It's filter removal of glass. Basically, remove the top. There's a filter at the tip. And once you insert it and filter your product, you remove the outer portion. And you're left ready to inject, all in one process, all in one step. The current process requires both a filter needle and a hypodermic needle. The filter needle filters out the product. Then that needle needs to be recapped, removed, discarded, and a new sterile hypodermic needle is then opened and placed on to the syringe. So it, there's chance for sepsis, there's chance for glass shards if it's not properly done. And so I, as a pharmacist, I've experienced this problem in the middle of codes where I couldn't find a filter needle. So I came up with a solution. And we're 5 months into FDA preparations. We've already met with the FDA with the pre-sub and we're good to go. Raising capital, but that's going really well. So I just got a tranche in my checking account this morning. So I'm a happy person. Happy Mother's Day to me, right?
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
actually, we're
Happy Mother's
familiar
Day to
with
all
this
the
kind
moms
of,
online.
yeah, we're familiar with this kind of devices for drug injections and, vials and all this kind of vial adapters, right? And all this kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, so I will need you, next year, once we receive FDA approval to get into that Asia market, right?
Okay, all right, great. All right.
We want to go global as quick as possible.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue. Maya, you don't sell in Asia either, but why not?
No, not yet. I mean, we've sold a few here and there,
Tell him
a
what
few
you make.
lasers. Yeah, so I work for a paramedic. We're headquartered in Denmark. I work in our US office. We make laser therapy equipment that accelerates the natural healing. So that's kind of the short, I guess, short gist of it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we do sell a few in Asia, but it hasn't been like a huge focus yet. But certainly maybe at some point.
The highest ticket item for you is 40,000?
Yes. Yeah, the
And
Giga laser
your
is
company is
40,000.
34 years old?
39, founded in 1982 by my dad, Arne Grinstead. So yeah, he's been making lasers for a long time. Yeah,
I think he's been making lasers longer than he's been making you. Okay, we don't need to
I was
divulge
pretty
age
little
here.
when he started the company. Yeah, let's just put it that way.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Zvi,
we actually do a lot of work with a Denmark company now.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah. So it's
What's the name of the company?
BK Medical. Are you familiar with them? BK Medical?
No, I'm not.
They have an
I'll
office
have
in
to look that up.
Boston and they have a big operation in Denmark. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
BK Medical.
yeah, BK Medical, yeah.
I'll have to look that up.
Zvi, you mentioned that you are doing some work in Asia now, yes?
Yeah, so for those, I've only been on once. So we produce ERG VEP equipment. This is basically functional electrical diagnostics, retinal response, cell testing. It's like an EKG for your heart, for your eyes, and is the short of it. Demos and supply are hard in Asia, and so all our global sales, there's always the issue of approvals and all that stuff, but we tend to work with it internationally with distributors more than direct sales. And it's a mixed bag because sometimes, from the marketing perspective, I'm not an engineer. I direct the marketing at LKC. But the challenge is the level of engagement with distributors. How much are they going to share information? How much are they going to use assets and try to provide them when their assets are terrible? If they don't understand your product, and you can train them and train them and train them on something relatively simple, but they, or they can be awesome partners who are really, hand in hand. That's finding the right distributor, I would say, is particularly for Asia because there's such a cultural divide, and the way you talk about products and set up information and talk to doctors is going to be so different colors and different, again, coming from a marketing perspective, not an engineer. That's the relationship you have to nurture, and it's really.
Maybe we'll start there because Ames does a great deal having to do with distribution. But before we do, I kept Dwayne on because, look at him. He looks like a podcaster. His show is catching some popularity, and I won't be surprised if after this discussion he says, "Hey, Joe, can I get Ames' contact information? Because he's going to want you to be on their show." So just say hi. He's a new dad, and he doesn't get a lot of rest. So if he does contact you and it's garbled, let it go.
Yeah, Ames, I'll reach out to you. That sounds good.
What kind of podcast do you have?
It's on the medtech industry. It's called Project MedTech. It's I don't know. Entrepreneurs, fundraising, regulatory, reimbursement, clinical, just anything an innovator would need to get a product to market. We talk to people. I also talked to a marketer named Joe Hage once, and it was pretty good.
And that was a good time. And tell them what you do for your day job.
I work for Covance, which will eventually just be just LabCorp on the medical device team. So we actually run a lot of clinical trials in Asia. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, Covance is a huge company, and yeah, LabCorp is obviously a well-known company competing with Quest.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I guess when I get a blood test, I go to LabCorp's closest office. And
Yeah.
we did have some dealings with Covance in China. I know they have a big lab in China. I think
Mhm.
they have a big lab for lab developed tests, LDT, lab developed tests, and things like that. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Joy.
So, yeah. So anyway, as Joe mentioned, my name is Ames Gross, and I'm the president and the founder of a company called Pacific Bridge Medical. So our website is at Pacific Bridge Medical. And I don't know, Joe, how much time would you like me to speak? I mean, like 15 minutes?
The longest we've ever gone is 90 minutes, so we're 15 minutes into the burn. We go as long as we have things to say.
All right. Okay, so basically I started the company in 1988, and I started the company from scratch. It wasn't too easy to start. The first 5 years we had very little income and very little business, but I was a single guy between 32 and 37 years old, so I didn't need to make a lot of money. So I started, and back in 1988, there weren't that many people that were that interested in Asia. There were a couple of big medical companies in Asia in '88, maybe GE, Johnson and Johnson, but most small to middle-sized companies were only in the U.S., and then some were going to Europe, but very few were in Asia. So prior to starting the company, I was like an overpaid yuppie working on Wall Street, helping Japanese companies buy U.S. skyscrapers and U.S. Companies in the early and mid '80s before the Japanese bubble burst in like 1989, 1990. So anyway, I started the company from scratch. I really had no knowledge of medical. I had to teach myself about medical devices, drugs, and we do some biotech work too.
Why medical?
Huh?
Why medical?
Well, I figured at the time when when I started the company in '88, I was familiar with Asia. I had lived in Japan and traveled throughout the region extensively. Of course, nobody was really going to China before 1988. But I thought about in the US what we could export. And I thought about medical products, and I also thought about technology. And I was never really great with computers, so I figured I'd focus on the medical. Um, so I just started from scratch, and I had to build up a network of good medical contacts in the various Asian markets. I had to teach myself the business, and I had to find medical companies that wanted to use our services. So it was quite
Sounds incredibly risky.
it was a risky venture, and I guess that's why I didn't get married till I was 38, because I was working all the time between 32 and 37, and even, so I was working all the time to get it off the ground. And personally, a lot of medical companies weren't interested in Asia, so it was really a tough sell for a long time. But toward as we got into the early 90s, more and more medical companies in 2000s, 2010s, or whatever, more and more medical companies started to have some interest in Asia. They could be interested in selling their products or finding distributors to sell their products. They could be interested in registering their products with the FDAs in each of the Asian countries. We have some companies that are doing sourcing components or sourcing med devices from China and other Asian markets. So over time, we got involved in a lot of areas, and you can see on our website we're involved with business development, registration, reimbursement for, you can see here device. You can see if you scroll down just a touch, Joe. Yeah, you can see our medical devices. So we're doing business development, regulatory services. We have a resource library of articles primarily I've written over the last 30 years on all the Asian markets. So if you have a chance to look at the resource library, I think that's helpful for people to learn more about Asia.
This is interesting. You give away your age now. You're doing this for 30 years.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be 65 next month. So
wait a minute, then the math is wrong. I thought I added up to 62.
No, I started in '88. Is 33, almost 33 years ago.
All right.
So when I started, yeah. So when I started the company, I was 32 years old, and now it's 33 years later. So I'm going to be 65 next month.
Look at that.
So
and you get senior discounts. That's you got it both ways. This is fantastic. I admire that.
The good news is I'm still in pretty decent health, so I'm planning to work for a lot longer. And No, basically my whole life is involved with Asia. Probably half Asian, and I lived in Japan for about 5 years in the early 80s, and then I traveled to all the countries throughout the early and mid 80s. And then also, so now we have actually 4 offices in Asia, and we have affiliate partners in the other countries. And we get calls from all kinds of companies for different kind of projects. As I mentioned, we have a client that has an office in Boston and also Denmark. So we have European customers, US customers, and even a few Asian customers.
How many full-time employees do you have?
We just have 10 people. And so they just have a few people in the US, and the other people are located in our Asian offices.
Okay. Well, let's start with Zvi's question. He
Okay.
was talking about how, I guess, spurious it is to find well prepared distributors to faithfully represent his product line.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot with distribution in Asia. Talk to us a little bit about what he might be thinking about. I'll bring him back on.
Yeah, so I think he made a good comment with regard to the cultural differences, because most Western people, they don't understand the difference between Japanese, Koreans, Chinese, Thai people, Indonesian people. So it's good to understand the cultural differences. So just like in any distributor search around the world, you want to get to know the distributor, what kind of products they're carrying, where their salespeople make calls. So in Asia, it's the same situation. We have to identify some companies, and we have to do lots of due diligence before we sign a contract with them. What I find is smaller device companies oftentimes will go to a trade show or have an exhibit booth somewhere, and a guy from Taiwan comes by and says, "Hi, my name's Joe Liu from Taiwan, and I have a distribution company, and we like your product. We'd like to sell it there." And then the U.S. or European company says to the guy in the booth, he says, "Hey, Tom, we're not selling in Taiwan. Why don't we sign this guy up?" Of course, that's probably the worst way to do it, because you've signed up. You get to meet Mr. Liu and you talk to him and whatnot, but you really don't know Mr. Liu in an Asian sense, because in an Asian sense, you have to spend a lot of time with people and you have to get to know them, not just like once at a trade show or twice at a trade show or something like this. So the issue is to do a lot of due diligence on the distributors you sign up before you sign them up. And that's where I find a lot of companies don't do that. So they sign up a distributor, they don't know them that well. The distributor may put an initial order in for $50,000 so that the manufacturer is happy, but then it's not the right distributor, and that distributor may end up not selling more or not communicating well on emails and that kind of thing. So you have to do a lot of due diligence with the distributor sign up. So we've been doing,
At that point, if they fail to move the product, do they try to push the product back to the manufacturer? Even if they don't, I know for $50,000 is not worth the headache and all of the communication and everything that you did with that guy. But do you
Yeah.
also have to eat the product then?
okay, so hopefully they paid for the product, so the distributor owns the product. But the issue is that for smaller mid-sized companies that are looking to sign up distributors, who is going to hold the registration, right? So before you can sell to the distributor, and before the distributor can sell to the Taiwanese people or Korean people, whoever they're selling to, they need to register the product with the FDA in that local country. So in Asia. So if your distributor has also registered your product in Taiwan, it probably took them a year to do that, then they hold the registration rights, not the foreign manufacturer. So the foreign manufacturer has no power over that distributor and that license. So the foreign manufacturer says, "Okay, Mr. Liu, you bought $50,000 of our product, you registered our product, but you haven't been selling our product very much the last 2 or 3 years. So we want to switch distributors." And Mr. Liu says, "Well, we registered the product, we hold the registration. So if you want us to relinquish our distribution of our registration of your product to a different distributor in Taiwan, we need you to pay us $30,000 to have a friendly transfer of the documentation from us to the new distributor, or you can re-register from scratch with the new distributor." And so that's where a lot of small to mid-sized companies get hung up, is they don't own the registration, they have no power over the distributor, and if they didn't do enough due diligence initially on the distributor, then they could have problems. So the upfront due diligence and checking out what you're doing with different distributors around the Asian markets is crucial, especially because the countries, the cultures, the religions, the whole bit is different than Judeo-Western, Judeo-Christian values. And
Let's take Zvi's company for example. So
Mhm.
you talked about it being the equivalent of an EKG for your eye.
Mhm.
And let's say that he were to come to you and say, Ames, you mentioned Taiwan. Ironically, we were looking at Taiwan and we don't know how to, figure out which distributor we should go with. Do you have a list of Taiwanese distributors that you trust that you think would be a good fit for our product?
Yeah, so mostly on the distributor search, we have people in each country. So we have a guy in Taiwan, we have a guy in Korea, lady in China, whatever that helps us.
And these are your full-time people or some
Some are full-time and
contractors?
some are full-time and some are affiliates that we've worked with for a long time.
Okay.
So we, if we have our own office in that Asian country, we use our own people. If we don't, we'd use a local partner that we've been working with for a while, and they would screen through the distributors, et cetera. On that EKG product for the eye, I am somewhat familiar with the ophthalmology markets in these countries. And so, you have to do your due diligence. Is there a demand? And, obviously, before you go into a market, you want to maybe identify some KOLs, key opinion leader doctors that can try your product first and see if they like the product. And if they think the price that you're offering the product for is going to be, accepted in the marketplace. And that's why another issue is for companies looking to export products or sign up distributors, you need to do some market research in that market, in that Asian market, maybe talking to some KOLs. And besides registration of the product there, you need to look into the reimbursement of the product for your registration in that country, right? So a lot of times people contact me, we'd like to go to Japan, it's a big market. I say, okay, and the classification of your product, in Japan they have 4 classes as opposed to 3. In most of the other Asian countries, the classification is class 3, and we need to do blah, blah, blah for the registration, and it's going to cost about $250,000. And then they say, okay, let's go forward and register it. We talk to some KOLs, et cetera, but they don't look into the reimbursement issue. So what would the Japanese government pay the hospital or the individual on a procedural fee to, what are they going to pay for the device that is going to be registered and shipped to the country? So there are a number of issues that people need to consider when they're looking at exporting, not only distributor search, product registration, and local reimbursement to determine which Asian country they want to export or do business in. So that's where we help companies. There's a lot of issues. We try to bring up the issues and try to investigate some of the issues before companies register or find distributors or, this kind of thing. A couple of comments about the Asian markets. I mean, as people here may know, all the Asian countries, or most of the Asian countries the people are getting richer. Their per capita incomes are going up in Asia, right? So, if you're in China 30 years ago, the per capita income might have been $1,000 per person, but now it's maybe, $8,000 per person. And if you're in the cities, it could be $40,000 per person. So, you have to look at the local economic situation, per capita incomes, and so those are important issues on trying to decide which countries to go to. But overall, the healthcare, the people are getting richer in Asia. Because they're getting richer, they demand better healthcare, and for better healthcare, they're looking for better devices and drugs to assist with the local doctors, et cetera. So the people are getting more money, better healthcare, looking for more innovative products. At the same time as the demand for better healthcare is growing in the Asian countries, keep in mind that some countries are making their own medical devices, and probably China is the biggest competitor to the US in the medical device space going forward. So whereas 20 years ago, China was making rubber gloves and wheelchairs or whatever they were doing, today they're making sophisticated medical devices. So local Chinese companies are making drug-eluting stents or sophisticated laser products now. And then we have the one lady, family started the company in Denmark. So as the markets are growing in Asia, they require more medical devices and drugs, better quality products. We're also now competing more and more with locally made products from Chinese medical device companies, Korean medical device companies, Japanese medical device companies. So a lot of the margins that we've been able to experience for some of the companies here are going to be cut in the future because of the local production by Chinese, Korean, Singaporean, or whatever medical device companies. The other thing to note is that on a regulatory standpoint, product registration in Japan has always been difficult, like the US FDA. but product registration in the other Asian markets has become more difficult too, especially in China. So a lot of companies trying to sell in China, they have to register their products there, but Chinese registration is very difficult. And actually in all the other countries, Korea, Taiwan, or whatever, they put in more device regulations. So registrations become more difficult in all those countries now. And the requirements, the documentation, the testing, and the possibility of local clinical studies to get your products into these markets is an issue. On the good side, though, the Asian countries have more basic healthcare insurance in the region. So countries like China now have a healthcare reimbursement. They have a healthcare system where all the people get some reimbursement, even though it's pretty low. In countries like Indonesia, which is a huge country, 250 million people, didn't have any healthcare for poor people. Now they do. So there's more health insurance in the region. So that has to be a plus too. I think the main thing when you're doing work there is to make sure you do your homework. You study the market, you understand the countries, et cetera, before you go in. The cultural differences are significant, and the way you want to interact with Asians is also quite different than you may act with Westerners. So, for example, Joe sends me an email. He says, Ames, how are you doing? Would you like to be on our coffee show in the morning, tomorrow morning, or whatever? I said, that's fine. But if I'm sending an email to Mr. Yamamoto in Japan, they're more used to having sort of an icebreaker up front. So, dear Mr. Yamamoto, how's the weather in Japan? It hasn't snowed yet in the US. Have you had snow there? And then, some kind of icebreaker, and then you can go into, what you're looking to work on together. And, it's just like in the holiday time, I get these holiday cards, from J&J or GE, but it just says holiday, happy holidays from GE. But then I think, well, who at GE do I know that could have sent me this card? Whereas when I'm sending holiday cards to my Asian partners, employees, or affiliates, I write out a very detailed, warm email to build a personal relationship of trust. Because unless you have personal relationships of trust with the people on ground with Asia, you could have a significant problem. So, I think there was one person on the call was asking about intellectual property in China. Well, of course, China's intellectual property is well known that it's not great. And if you have a state-of-the-art new kind of product and you want to, you might want to develop the market in the US and Europe before you go to China, because, if you're a small company and you start selling in China, unless it's difficult to re-engineer or difficult to copy, they may try to copy the product. So intellectual property is an issue throughout the region still too.
Talk to me about India. Do you work in India?
Yeah, we do some work in India. So India is also a totally new culture and a new, it's a different kind of marketplace.
I specifically want to ask, so my friend Tony is on the call. I'm going to, Tony, I've made it so that you can speak if you choose, and I'm going to share my screen. And his company is working on a breathing device for coronavirus, which, as you know, is exploding across India. What thoughts would you have about how, when he's ready to commercialize, he might approach the Indian market? And Tony, if you have anything you'd like to add, you're welcome to just speak up.
It's Antonio? Antonio?
Just Tony.
Oh, Tony. So what will you get the product approved in the US first?
That was our plan.
Oops. Well, what I did was I made him a panelist, so we lost him for a sec, but he should join us again, and we'll be able to see him if he chooses to come on camera.
Yeah. We're poised to do FDA approval. We're ready to do clinical trials here. As soon as we finish our funding round. But in the meantime, a company in India has actually contacted us. And they have a similar device and have asked us to help them. And we're about to send a press release out today. They've asked us to help them get materials because they've got a similar device, but our device uses heliox. It's a combination of helium and oxygen in order to get the oxygen down into the lung. Helium will carry it down there further. But their device in India just uses oxygen. We're also talking to them about perhaps them doing some clinical trials. But that's our first exposure to India, and it was only as a result of this company actually finding us. And at first, they wanted to make sure that they weren't violating any of our patents.
What's the name of that company, Tony?
I knew that until you asked me.
Thank you. Because I was gonna look him up, and it's like, well, somebody called you up and said, hey, I'd like to work with you, and
Yeah,
I'm sure that sets Ames alarms off, like, well, what do you know about them and this and that, and how do you know this and that? So that's why I wanted to bring you on to.
yeah, I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah. Well, I think the issue is, it is difficult to do business with India, and you need to be careful about what's going on there.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm the CFO of the company, and of course, I'm the one that's always putting the brakes on.
I would be very nervous about some Indian company and doing a clinical trial with them and things like that. I mean, I don't know, you want to protect your nitrous or your gases, and I mean, next thing you know, they're going to be trying to copy you. So,
right. The company is called X Cross Fusion, all one word, XROSS, and then Fusion.
Yeah, well, I have no idea about them, but I think the point would be is, have you guys met them face to face?
Not yet. We've had Zoom calls, and actually, I wasn't in the calls. The CEO and the operating officer were on the line with them.
Yeah, well, I think you need to do a lot of due diligence with them. Somehow you have to. It's better to meet them face to face, and I would keep your hands in your pockets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very tough. Indian market, Indian culture is totally different than East Asian culture, and well, we have some very good people in India, and Indians are quite smart and can be quite good at business. I mean, copying is rampant. It's an issue. And
I know.
people think they speak English, so maybe it's a little better than China, but I'm not sure that that's the case.
I'm on your side.
Yeah.
Now I need to make sure I have the proper caution lights working.
I would be very cautious. I would
Well,
be
thank
very cautious. And India's now put in some new regulations too about medical device registration. So historically in India, only certain device product families required registration, but now they've added a lot more products requiring registration, and also they made the registration regulations more difficult. Now, in the case of your product, because the virus is so rampant in India, maybe there's some way to get the emergency use authorization.
Right.
Right. And yeah, I mean, we could maybe look into that, but I think you want to try to get it US FDA approved first. I don't know if that timing will work with still the pandemic being out there in India. So
they're desperate. They've been,
they're desperate. So I mean, I guess it may be easier if it was like a locally made product in India, but then how do you protect your intellectual property rights?
Right. And unfortunately with us, we've missed that for the first patent on a product. We missed the international filing dates.
Yeah.
So India is not going to be covered by our patent at this point.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether we'll ever actually pay for patent protection in India, because I'm not sure that really carries the day sometimes.
Ames, how arched is your back about this idea? I mean, would you encourage Tony to get in touch with you after this call to see if there's something, or would you be like, there are so many red flags, let me just tell you to stop right now?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say stop right now. I mean, unless you think there's some way you can come to terms. Where are they located in India?
In the southern part.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking like Bangalore, or some of the other cities in the south? I mean, it's
Why does that matter?
Well, I'm just curious because I have some people in different locations. So.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like,
No, I mean,
less trustworthy south, more trustworthy north, or something.
No, I mean, it's untrustworthy, the whole place as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, I have a few people in India that I trust very much. I've known them for many years, and they're basically in Delhi and Bangalore. And I would, they're totally honest, reputable people. But otherwise in business there, it's not so easy.
Yeah, the first thing they asked for, which we are going to supply them because of their emergency, is to see if there's anything we can do to help them get parts for their existing technology, which is oxygen related. So they can get oxygen devices out to their patients, and we're just simply going to be the kind of the middleman. Either we'll buy some parts and send it to them, or sell it to them and at a small markup, or we'll have them directly then do deals with suppliers we found for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, as long as you get the money up front, I think you're okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give any credit to anybody you met on a Zoom call with India.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's a funny story is that when I started in India, like 30 years ago, I had a guy that was supposedly running my office. So I used to pay him every month and I paid the rent every month. And then one day I went to go look for the office. I had the address from signing some paperwork. I went to the address and I went to see the office and there was no office. So this Indian guy was collecting the rent for the space, but there was no space.
My Lord.
So of course I got rid of him pretty quickly. But I mean, this kind of maneuvering is pretty common.
Yeah. So the place in India there is Coimbatore, Coimbatore.
I don't know where it's located. I mean, I don't know where it's what city it's near, but
it's in the far south. It's in the smaller part of the triangle.
Yeah. Well,
May I put Ames' website back up should you choose to follow up? It's pacificbridgemedical.com. Thank you for chiming in. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. What would you say? Okay. What would you say are among the top 3 problems that you end up solving for medical device manufacturers who want to? And I'm talking more about when you get their call and you're like, oh my God, if you had only called me first.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're dealing with all kinds of issues and problems. That's why they call. Nobody called me with a good situation, although we do have some large companies call us and they ask us about, can you do an audit of our people there to see if our Asian offices are okay? So, our one of our main activities is helping companies register products in Asia with the FDAs there. And we recently helped Apple get their Apple Watch approved in Japan with the healthcare. Yeah, with the healthcare software. So that was a large project. So a lot of times people call us for product registration. How do we get our product registered? Should we register it on our own or should we let our distributor register it? What should we do? What should we think about? So that's probably one of the main things. Similar to what we talked about, distributor search. How do we find the right distributor? I think we sort of covered that topic. And we have some calls about companies that are sourcing medical devices from Asia or sourcing components. We have a supplier in China. They've been supplying to us for 4 years, XYZ widget. And now XYZ widget is coming to us, but there's quality problems. How can you help us at the factory? So we have some quality people that could go to the factory that maybe making devices or components for Western device companies looking to import or source components or medical devices from those countries. And, all kinds of other issues, reimbursement issues. We have a new mousetrap and it's really doing well in Europe and US. We want to sell it in Japan. So what kind of reimbursement can we expect in the Japanese market for our new widget? And of course, the reimbursements for the products depend on the country. The reimbursement in the US is one thing, in Europe it's another thing. In Japan, it's going to be another thing too. So how can we increase the reimbursement? Is it even possible to increase the reimbursement? So that's another issue we deal with. Sometimes companies ask us to help them find the right KOLs, key opinion leaders. We want to see if this product is going to fly in Korea. Could you help us find a couple KOLs in the radiology space that could give us a determination whether this product has a chance there? Is there a market opportunity? Is there a market opportunity at the price that we want to sell it at? So these are, sorry, here on the East Coast, I'm suffering from allergies, but these are some of the kinds of issues that we're dealing with. And then, of course, then people say to us all the time, like, okay, we want to go to Asia. Which Asian country should we go to?
I was going to ask you that. I bet that's a
Yeah.
common one. And is
Yeah.
there a blanket answer, like all else equal, I would go to Korea, or I would,
Well, so the which country to start in depends on a number of factors. Number one, what the device is, what the classification of the device is in the US or Europe, how much money you want to invest in your Asian business, what your long-term strategy is in the Asian business. So if you have a new state-of-the-art product that's a little more expensive, right, then you want to go to the richer countries. And the richer countries in Asia are going to be Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and Korea, right? Those are the countries that have a lot of money, they have some reimbursement, and they're looking for state-of-the-art products. You may also look at China market for, because people on, say, the East Coast of China are pretty wealthy, and they can also pay out of pocket for specialized technologies. But if you got something that's expensive, it's state-of-the-art, you probably don't want to go to the poor Asian countries like Thailand, Indonesia, India, Philippines, Vietnam, because they don't have a lot of money, and the healthcare is at a more basic level.
so let's build on that. What might be some potentially class 1 products that you would say, oh, you absolutely have to go to these poorer countries first? That would be perfect.
Well,
Are their margins big enough to,
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think, in general, there's 3 classes, right? Class 1, 2, and 3.
right?
But keep in mind, in Japan, there's 4 classes. And so, some differences there. But
What's the 4th class?
well, they just have 2 classes for risk and riskier, maybe. Like, we can look at it that way.
Yeah.
But the point is that exporting class 1 products is probably pretty difficult to Asia these days, because
They can
those
make
are
them
normally,
cheaper.
they're low-tech products, they're more commodity oriented, and they can make the products on their own there. So
Right.
it's hard to compete with locally made products.
Right.
So normally you're looking at class 2 or class 3 products, which are more sophisticated, hopefully have some patents or intellectual property protection. And, so you'd be looking at exporting more sophisticated products.
Which mean more expensive. So I'm asking, perhaps what categories would you that come to mind that say that would be perfect for Thailand?
Well, well, I wish I could make it that simple. I wish it was that simple. But if you look at that resource center on our website, you can click into medical devices, Thailand, Japan, Korea. There's hundreds of pages of information about each market, on the registration, on the market opportunities, and things like that. So it's hard to give a blanket statement about which one is best.
But are there characteristics? Again, the gap between your knowledge and mine on this is so big that I'm thinking, you just told me they don't have a lot of money,
Yeah.
that the very cheapest things they can find themselves.
Right.
If you have something more sophisticated, therefore more expensive, you might consider. So is it like the lowest, rung of kind of more expensive, just above what, but I'm trying to get a sense of what could work. When would I say, oh my God, Thailand, what a huge opportunity for me?
Right. So,
or any poor country.
Yeah. Well, I think, you have to look at the countries in sort of tiers. So again, the top tier, the more sophisticated healthcare, the more money. We're talking Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan,
Right.
Singapore. So that's the top of the rank. Then below that, you have a second tier, which might include countries like China. China's got plenty of money, so some parts of China are in the top tier and some are in the lower tier. But the second tier may include countries like China, Thailand, Malaysia, in the second tier. Then the third tier, the poorest countries with the least healthcare now, are going to be in countries like India, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia. So you have to we have to discuss the product in detail, the advantages, disadvantages of the products, the costs of the products, and then what kind of budget you have for going into Asia before we sort of pinpoint which country would make the most sense. So they all have some opportunities and difficulties, but it really depends on the product and the specific situation. So it's a little hard for me to get more specific.
How about this? Can you recall the last time you helped an American company have their product distributed in the Philippines or Indonesia.
Yeah, I mean, we've done some of that, and yeah, mostly class 2 products, and actually what you can see is like big companies like a Medtronic or J&J or Stryker or
And
whatever.
these are among your clients.
Well, we've worked with some large companies from time to time, as I mentioned, and also we recently got the Apple Watch approved in Japan. But big companies have very sophisticated products, and a lot of the big companies that are making these AAA products that are very sophisticated are now coming out with a B line of products. So they take away some of the bells and whistles from the AAA product, and they come up with the basic model, going from a fancy car down to a Hyundai or some basic car. So if the company is able to come out with a B line of products, which is a stripped down version, less bells and whistles, then they oftentimes look to get those products in the poor countries. Yeah.
When we were talking about India earlier, I wrote a private note to my friend Sanjeev and invited him to jump on, and he just did.
Okay.
We're grateful for. He's given us a talk about the opportunities of working in India. And Sanjeev, when you come on, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for.
Ames is the founder and principal of his company, Pacific Bridge Medical, and he helps medical device manufacturers do business in Asia. And one of the gentlemen on the call, Tony Grega, has a product that is about helping breathing, and it's especially relevant during this coronavirus surge in India. And Ames was quite cautious about entering that market. And I was hoping that you might comment, when we talked some weeks, months back, you made a compelling argument for, don't forget India. There's a real opportunity there. I don't know how to marry your opposing views, and I thought that would be an interesting little side topic here. So if you would, I know you don't have the benefit of having heard what Mr. Gross said earlier, but in general, his message was one of great caution. And yeah, if you can get them to pay you up front, give it a try, but I wouldn't extend any credit to someone you met on a Zoom call, was his quote.
No, as a matter of fact, I actually agree with Ames about that. What you do is get letter of credits in advance. I wouldn't even take a wire transfer, because you may get the first wire and the second may be delayed forever and ever. And the third, if you try to take it in 3 installments. So I prefer to take letter of credits. That makes it much easier to operate there. Having said that, it depends on who you're dealing with. If you've got the right distributor and they are buying from you and reselling, it becomes much, much easier. Like in our case, when I was doing POC medical systems, we had a distributor who was selling to the government. And you remember we had this order for about 20 million. They gave us a letter of credit, right? And so then we didn't have to worry about the government paying them 90 days later or 120 days later. That's up to them to collect, right? And that's how I would do it in India. But the market.
Did that order go through? Was it fulfilled and you got paid?
Well, no, we were never able to ship because of our financial problems at POC. So
Just for Ames' benefit, what was POC?
POC stood for point of care medical systems. We were developing a breast cancer detection system. We are so. By the way, Joe, just FYI, I started another company called Hooray DX, which is the next generation of POC medical systems.
Hooray DX?
Hooray DX, yeah.
Like hereditary with an X at the end?
Yes.
Okay.
HARAE. And we just got our first funding closed about 2 weeks back.
Congratulations. Ask how much you raised?
Right now, we have raised about $500,000, and we are in talks with Series A investors, etc., for raising about 10 million. We are in the process of doing that, and we've got a team in Shenzhen and another team down in LA, which is starting to work on the products itself. So as those milestones are met, we expect to be able to close the Series A. But again, the order from India is back in our hands because it's the next generation of what we had developed earlier for cancer diagnostics. And unfortunately, had that company been around, we could have probably brought a COVID test long back as well. You know, it's not here nor there.
Ames, anything that he said that catches your ear?
I don't know, Sanjay, if you're in the US or?
Yes, I'm actually in the Bay Area. So Ames, just a little background of, I've done multiple startups. One of my startups, which was in the biotech space, doing gene therapy and antibodies, etc., was based in Mumbai, India itself.
Mhm.
Rest of the companies have been in the US, and we marketed all over the world, and India has been a pretty big market. As a matter of fact, my brother, Joe, you might remember, with him, I'd started Septrogen, and then I left, he continued on. They just shipped the two largest purification systems for the COVID vaccine to Cipla in India just yesterday to scale up production of the vaccine from 40 million doses to 400 million doses, which will start next month. So, and they got actually paid up front rather than even later.
Yeah, no, I listen, India can be a great market, I think, but you need to know the people very well. And you need
Yeah.
to have a big trust with the people. And I think the gentleman on the phone had said his company had some contact with an Indian company through Zoom and blah, blah, blah. And I said, unless you met the people, you know them for a while, you have a strong relationship of trust on the introduction, it's tough to do business in India.
No, you're absolutely right. Part of doing business in India, and as a matter of fact, even in China and Japan is, it's not just on Zoom. All these three countries really believe in building a relationship.
Right.
And, there's the trust which goes along. So if you look at Japan, it takes about a year, the cycle. China and India can do it faster, but then the trust factor hasn't been built. So I prefer to build that trust factor before I go in and do
I'm
it.
just wondering, in a case where, oh my God, coronavirus is rampant, we're getting 400,000 new cases daily, we've got to do something. Is that just an opportunity for, using the concept of scarcity of time and tricking someone into trusting you and then taking advantage of them more? Or, you know what, sometimes you have to lean forward and for the good of the people, you take that chance? I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, there are people who are very scrupulous, and they will, excuse my language, they will screw you, and others who are good. And it's all about knowing who you trust and who you don't. Having been and done a lot of work in India, that way for me it's much easier. It may not be that straightforward for everyone, right? I mean, I
Yeah, well,
left India when I was
if
15.
if you're Indian and you understand the culture, yeah, then it's a lot easier.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I left India when I was 15. I'm
Yeah.
60 now, but it's still, having gone back to India to do a company there, it actually helped quite a bit to understand the culture,
No.
re-understand the culture, having left there years ago.
Yeah.
Has it changed dramatically these 45 years?
Pardon me?
Has it changed dramatically these 45 years?
Oh, it has. It has. It's not what I remember it to be.
It's not your father's India?
Nope, not at all. I left there in '76, and now it's a very different country.
Yeah, but I think a good example is for the people on the line is that when you were there in '76, I don't know which town you were growing up or what city you were in, but if you went to the pharmacy or you went to the local store and you said you wanted to buy a pack of gum, the guy might say $10 and you might say $6. And you
Right.
might go back and forth negotiating until for a pack of gum, which is at the corner store.
Exactly. Today it's become, there's a fixed price, so you don't have to.
Right. Today it's a lot better, but that kind of mentality is still prevalent in the business community.
True. That's still there. And, it's like when I go to raise money out there, I was talking to an investor recently from India who's in the Middle East, and he goes, well, Sanjeev, how much have you put into your company? I said, this much. And he said, and you expect me to give you so much for 15% of the company? I said, well, that's the valuation. And he goes, no, you got to put in more, and otherwise you can't have that much percentage. I said, you don't understand. investing. Let's not talk about it. So you're right. The mentality is there. It's.
Well, I mean, yeah. So, if you're dealing, I mean, our business primarily is in East Asia and Southeast Asia, ASEAN area.
Mhm.
We do some business in India, but anyway, Joe, if there are any more questions from the audience, I'm happy to address them. Otherwise, I have to get back to work. So,
Okay, well, I really appreciate the time. Sanjeev, I appreciate you jumping on like that with so little notice. Thank you.
Sorry, I came on late. As,
No, it's all good. Glad to see you.
okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I would just conclude with, usually I like to ask my guest, if you remember nothing else from this call, what would you tell the folks? I'll offer, if you remember nothing else from this call, I'm friendly with Mr. Ames Gross. If you have a question about doing business in Asia, let me get you in touch with him. Ames, I'm very grateful for your time today.
Okay, no problem. Very nice to see you, Joe, and thank you very much to the audience. Glad to hear about all the
Keep it
developing
going.
technologies, etc.
Thanks all. See you next week.
Okay. Bye.